Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are back to Wednesday nights, at least kind of for the time being. We've been doing some Thursday night stuff, occasional Wednesdays, but usually in training camp in the season, despite some different scheduling things, we like going Wednesday night, kind of our old school thing. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network. Well, John, busy week already, and it's not even halfway done. We've got a lot to talk about tonight with things. How are you doing, buddy?
Smacked right in the face with a lot of stuff has happened, right? A lot of things that we've been waiting for, specifically, training camp beginning, a certain player's contract, two other certain players' contracts that haven't really gotten here just yet, but things are ramping up. And before you know it, we'll be previewing the Browns game in September 10th. But for now, we got some training camp to talk about.
We do have some training camp to talk about. We've also got a big domino that has fallen. And I guess that's where we will start. And that is that Justin Herbert, the guy who was picked just a few picks after Joe Burrow in the 2020 draft, who's had a very nice career with the Chargers, despite not having the postseason success. Statistically, really, great career for Justin Herbert. He inks a 5-year, $262.5 million contract, John Sheeran. And this came through, was it yesterday, right? Last night, I think. And so now this is another one of those dominoes that falls for Joe Burrow's contract extension. We'll get there in just a second. We can talk about Justin Herbert's contract. We'll pull that up. But I mean, this is basically now we're talking Lamar Jackson, we're talking Jalen Hurts, we're talking Justin Herbert. I mean, deal after deal is being cemented that affects Joe Burrow and his contract extension. And this one kind of most likely seems to be the last one to fall in place to get the structure done for Joe's deal.
It's so funny, man, because our buddy Mike Florio for Pro Football Talk, he wrote an article. It was yesterday morning about how the Bengals and Chargers are in this waiting area with their quarterbacks because it's like a standoff in a war. Like, neither Justin Herbert's camp nor Joe Burrow's camp wanted to move first, apparently, and that was supposedly supposed to benefit both teams because, both quarterbacks weren't necessarily holding out. And then 12 hours later, because we had heard nothing about Justin Herbert's contract negotiations, even to the level of the reports that we heard about Joe Burrow. And then Herbert, that news comes out, and it's now the largest deal in NFL history in terms of just total money involved and average annual value. And just like with Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, every notable metric in the contract has now elevated. Not only is the average annual value now higher than both Jackson and Hurts, Justin Herbert's total guaranteed, not like fully guaranteed, but like practical guarantees are now $193 million, which is about $8 million more than Lamar Jackson. His fully guaranteed number at $133 million is actually just right below Lamar Jackson at $135 million. But the benchmarks have now been firmly established because if there's any quarterback here that was going to get paid this offseason that compares the most to Joe Burrow, it's Justin Herbert. Mm-hmm. And this was always going to be the floor that Burrow's camp wanted to say, we want to leapfrog this, whether it's a huge leap or just a minor leap to maybe a few $1 million more per year, whatever the case may be. This was always going to be the true floor, and it's the true starting point for Joe Burrow. And beyond just the total money or whatever, we could be seeing with Joe Burrow the first contract with $200 million in practical guarantees, because that would be the next step for any quarterback, and Joe Burrow just happens to be the next guy in line.
So when you look at this here, you can see this is on over the cap for Justin Herbert, and the numbers for his, I mean, man, some of these cap numbers here. But I mean, it is what it is. And this, I believe, if I remember correctly, the one just below he's at his contract value, the total value, $262.5 million, right? I think the one below that, what was it, 260, right? Or 255, something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, it was just, again, that minor leap just to get him to be the fully, the number one paid player in NFL history here. And you can kind of see some of the numbers here. And, you're looking at the first two numbers. Those are basically what his rookie deal, is that still part of his rookie deal, and then they tacked on 5 years? Is that kind of how they structured that, or what?
2023 was the last year of his rookie deal, and 2024 is the fifth year option. So
yes, yeah, that's okay. That's what I was, yeah. And so then, yeah, you tack on these extra 5 here. So there you go. But then, you look at these numbers, prorated bonuses, you're looking at $22 million a year, basically $22+ million a year through the first handful of years of Justin Herbert's deal. And then, yeah, you said the fully guaranteed money, it's up here, $133,738,375 is that number. Now, when we talk about this contract and we talk about Joe Burrow, we're going to play you a video in just a second too, by the way, about Joe Burrow, the potential contract he would sign, et cetera. But when we talk about that, that's still the area that the benchmarks have been set, as you have noted, John. But you also noted here that this was slightly lower guaranteed money than Lamar Jackson. And then we know with the Bengals and how they have structured, while they pay big contracts to their quality players, they have had big contracts paid out to a number of different stars. The guaranteed money is always the question with the Bengals, right? And so that's that, I think, with the Joe Burrow deal, how they're going to structure that, that's going to be the most interesting thing with this, I think.
Right. And it's, yeah, like you said, it's one thing to just receive the largest deal in just practical money. It's the number that like the agents care about the most, because it just means that, hey, I negotiated the largest deal in NFL history. And for the most part, quarterbacks do see every penny of that deal, so long as they're just above average and a Peyton Manning situation doesn't occur. But as we all know, with NFL contracts, they are far from 100% guaranteed, unless you're Deshaun Watson. So when it comes to guaranteed money in this sense, like, that's the true number that teams care about. So like the Chargers are truly on the books here for 133 million, and I believe like Herbert's year one cash is something astronomical. I think it's the largest in NFL history. It might be, if it's not 100 million, it's I think it's close to 100 million in year one cash. I'll have to look that up though here shortly. But that is the big hurdle, right? It's always been a matter of how much cash do the Bengals have on hand to pay Burrow to basically exceed whatever number the Herbert was going to make. And Herbert now has set a pretty high bar in that regard. And obviously, the whole antiquated escrow rules kind of apply here too. But the Bengals can agree to like a $600 million deal if they really wanted to, because most of that $600 million, it just gets paid in the future. The team's guaranteed to just incur revenue so long as they continue to exist in the NFL, and that the NFL continues to bring in record profits after record profits year after year. Like, the money is always going to be there to pay your salary as the years go on, but how much money you have up front that you can put into an account that is guaranteed to be paid to that player, that's always been the question. And I think it's been the reason why a lot of people were suggesting that the Bengals go for some astronomical numbers so they can lower the amounts of true guarantees, and why, for the players' perspective, the opposite is probably their preference, because a shorter deal with higher guarantees means that there's more money that's guaranteed to go into your pocket, and if it's a shorter deal, there's a quicker turnaround for renegotiation and getting back out into the market to then get another big deal on top of that. So this 5-year range with about $50 or so million per year, that seems to be the sweet spot that quarterbacks and their agents have found, and I would expect it to remain the case with Joe Burrow, because I don't see a reason why they would deviate from that.
Well, there was we've referenced this report a couple of times on the show, that I think it was Jeremy Fowler of ESPN in referencing a potential extension for Joe Burrow, this was the last piece of the puzzle for Joe Burrow to potentially sign. Now, there was a report that he was going to wait to see. You tend to believe that now that that's kind of come to fruition here. So this does appear to be the last piece. Now, not a good day for the Bengals are cheap crowd, or the Bengals aren't going to pay players crowd. And there are a couple of reasons why, potentially. I'm going to show you one here. And this is credit to ESPN and their NFL Live crew. Adam Schefter just put this video out about their Twitter account, or X account, whatever you call that platform now, put this out about an hour ago. And this tells you a bit about where the Bengals are with Joe Burrow and their contract negotiations.
I think by the time the season starts, the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow will figure out a way to bridge their differences, and they will produce what then will be the highest paying annual average salary contract in NFL history. If we want to put it on the bottom line of ESPN right now, put it on there. Joe Burrow is expected to become the highest paid player in NFL history at some point this summer. We just don't know exactly when, but that deal will beat Jalen Hurts' deal. That deal will beat Lamar Jackson's deal. That deal will beat Justin Herbert's deal. And that deal will be the new landmark deal that other deals then follow, because Joe Burrow is going to be a very wealthy man. That news yesterday about Justin Herbert impacted a lot of people, but there's nobody that it impacted more than Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And they're sitting there, and they now have a starting point at which to go. And I can promise you the numbers are going to be well north of the numbers that came in on Justin Herbert.
So there you go. Now, the key phrase again that he used there was average annual value, right? I mean, so there's nuances to that. But again, people are saying they're not going to pay him. They're not going to be able to pay everybody. They're not going to be able to. They don't pay their players. Just false narrative after false narrative about this team, because as we've said a number of times on this show, they're high-quality skill position players, in particular on offense. They pay them, and they pay big money, and it looks as if, and that's Adam Schefter's words there on ESPN, and credit to ESPN and NFL Live, they're going to make a landmark deal. They're going to make him the highest-paid player in the foreseeable future, probably in the very near future.
I kind of equated to the entire culmination of like Bengals narratives. It's like a dam. And the past 3 or so years, there have been many efforts to just completely break the dam down. And right now, it's like it's on its last twig, and that last twig is, in fact, just guaranteeing money beyond the first year. And this is why the initial reporting of the Orlando Brown Jr. deal was so significant, because those initial reports stated that he had guaranteed money in the second year of that contract. And I was like, oh, like this is for real now. Like they finally crossed that threshold, and that ended up not being the case. He just happened to have the largest signing bonus for an offensive lineman in NFL history. That was their way of kind of still getting around it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with Joe Burrow, because I actually just looked it up. Justin Herbert's year one cash is not even anywhere close to 100 million. Lamar Jackson still holds the record with 80 million getting paid this year. So that's still the benchmark. The Bengals are probably going to have to eclipse that if they want to continue not breaking their mold of not guaranteeing money beyond the first year. They're going to have to give him well north of 100 million in cash in 2023 alone. And if they can do that and Burrow is okay with that, then they should just go ahead and do that. But if they want to kind of follow the framework of what these other quarterbacks have done in order to make this as simple as possible, they're going to have to just break down that final twig and just release the dam water, because that is the last step here in terms of just the Bengals being completely like any other franchise, because they've done so much already to erase a lot of these narratives. But that's the one that people still hold on to. People in the know too, like Jason for Over the Cap, like that was something that he referenced yesterday when talking about how, Burrow is not necessarily in the same shoes as Justin Herbert because of the team he plays for. And that still holds weight because we still have yet to see a contract like that. But if any player is capable of breaking the Bengals mold here, it's obviously Joe Burrow.
That's, you just took the words right out of my mouth right there. That the changes have coincided with his arrival I think the major changes, I mean, there have been some slow and incremental changes, obviously, in the Marvin Lewis era and all of that. We know that. But the major changes we have seen over the free agency approach in terms of outside free agents, the initiatives, fan engagement initiatives, everything, right? Everything we've seen has really coincided in these last handful of years in his arrival. So and quite honestly, they may have to. I mean, I don't know that he's going to. They know the numbers, a lot of the numbers that you said, first year cash and everything. They know those numbers, so they're going to reference that, and that's probably what they're going to. I don't see how they're going to work around that. But your gut feeling on when, because it seems like this isn't going to be an if anymore. When this gets done, do you think it's done this week? Do you think it's done months down the road? I mean, not months down the road, but do you think it's done later this summer? Do you think? I mean, when do you think this is done? Now that this Herbert deal is in place, your gut feeling.
I mean, it could literally be any minute. Like yesterday, like I went out with some friends and I took my computer there just because I wasn't gonna miss it out. Like I didn't know if they were just waiting for that shoe to drop so they can just tweak a couple of numbers there. We've seen these deals happen in early August. We've seen them happen like a day before week 1. It just could be any time in this framework, and that's why I think Schefter was just very vague about it being sometime before the regular season begins. I think there's just crossing T's and dotting I's at this point. Like the cash is there. There's enough confidence to say that this is going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it happens sometime between the end of the preseason and the beginning of the regular season.
Okay. I think, part of me thinks that this will get done really fast really quickly, now that this is, now that they've got all this language and everything figured out and the numbers kind of crunched and everything. But part of me also thinks that it may linger out there a little bit. I mean, I would say, hey, maybe by the end of this week you could see something, but I think it may go into a little bit. I don't know that. I think there's urgency there, but I don't know if it's now, we have to get this deal done days after the Herbert deal. I don't know if there's that much urgency, particularly if they're ironing out different numbers and maybe digging some toes into the sand in certain elements of the contract. But yeah, I think it's going to be in the very near future for sure. The other element, John, that I wanted to share was that kind of coincides with this is now, you have the sentiment. Well, first it was, they're not going to pay Burrow. Now it's Adam Schefter and pretty much everybody believes that they are going to pay Burrow and pay him handsomely and make him the highest, at least at the current time, the highest paid player ever. Now, that being said, then the second argument is, if they're going to do that, then that means they're not going to. That means they're not going to be able to keep T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, maybe even Logan Wilson, DJ Reader, all these other guys that are going to be coming up here. Their contracts are coming up here. Well, this is now an article on CincyJungle.com, and the quote is, "I'm confident we'll be able to keep everybody." And so, not a good day for the haters of the Bengals trio here. And the quote here, because Burrow joined once again, credit to Field Yates, ESPN, and NFL Live. Quote, "Our front office has done a great job of that the past couple of years of putting us in the best position to succeed the way that we have. So we'll see where it goes, but I'm confident that we'll be able to keep everybody." Again, likely referencing T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and others in that mold there. So, again, I keep saying it. I don't want to be a broken record, but the Bengals have shown in the slimmest of times, in the darkest of times, in their pretty good days and in their really good days, that they pay quality players, they pay quality offensive skill positions, and they do so handsomely. And they find ways to keep multiple players at a time to keep a core intact. And I think they recognize that. The second thing, John, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is we've seen it a lot in basketball, but I mean, these guys, these stars, know that they want to play with each other, and they find ways to stay on a team, to go to another team together, whatever the case may be. And they know where they can win. And if they can get paid, and it's a place where they know that they can win because they are together, they will find a way to do that. And I think that that's a bit of what's being, hinted at here with these kinds of quotes with Joe Burrow and the crew that should be getting subsequent contract extensions after his.
Yeah. So, I feel like this isn't really understood for whatever reason, but like teams and front offices, they negotiate with multiple players coincidingly, like at the same time. Best example, DJ Reader signed his contract in free agency like 4 p.m. on like Tuesday of that year. And then Trey Waynes agreed to terms like 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
A couple years prior to that, I think it was Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap agreeing on the same day, and they were both like they had their
extensions,
at the
right?
same time. Yeah. These things happen all at once, which is why I don't think the timing with the Burrow extension has anything to do with getting, T. Higgins or Logan Wilson under wraps. Like those preliminary talks have already happened. The numbers are already there. This is also kind of a reference to Zim's whole thing with T. Like that contract is more or less been drafted at this point. It's just a matter of making sure that enough cash is on the table to actually fulfill those contracts, making sure that Burrow's done first, so then all the other financials end up making sense. It's entirely possible that you see 2 or 3 deals follow Joe Burrow in very rapid fashion just to get all this stuff done. It's just a matter of making sure that that number one deal kind of is finalized. And just real quick, Anthony, at the Bengals media luncheon, Mike Brown's like annual 10 minutes of talking a year, he said something that was very true, but also very funny and very indicative of someone who's about to turn 88 years old. He was comparing working the salary cap to feeding hogs, and how if you have a bag of corn and you have 10 hogs, that corn's going to run out pretty quickly, which makes sense. It's another way of saying, like, there's the pie is only so big, and you can only divvy it out in so many different ways. But we've been saying this since February. We know that pie is dedicated to Joe Burrow, his receivers. Like that, those are the most important pieces of the pie. And some parts of the roster are going to get sacrificed from that. And it could be DJ Reader. It could be Chidobe Awuzie. It could be several pieces on defense. It could even be, like Tyler Boyd. All these other ancillary pieces to the pie, but nothing comes before Joe Burrow and his top 2 receivers. And we've kind of known this from the jump.
Additionally, and I talked about this on the headline show earlier this week, based on Mike Brown's words, you are very well, you very well could be correct in terms of future players and future contracts that may or may not be given out. He referenced sacrifices and or tough decisions on players. I think some of those have already been made in this last free agency. I mean, letting some of these guys that are valuable players, their safeties, P. Ryan. I mean, they offered P. Ryan and I think Bell contracts, but I mean, they let those guys go, and those are the tough decisions. They probably could have upped things and given into things to keep some or all of those guys if they truly wanted to. But those are the sacrifices that then come to keep a Joe Burrow long term, to keep a T. Higgins long term, to keep a Jamar Chase long term. So I think it's the reference is, yes, it very well could be future sacrifices, but I think it also was a reference a little bit to quell some fears that it's some stuff that may have already transpired.
Yeah, you just got to follow what they've done, like what they've actually put on paper, what they've actually put the plan, and that is get younger on defense, because there's not going to be major investments really made there. And maybe DJ Reader's like the biggest variable here, because he's phenomenal in every sense of the word. And he's also old, and he has an injury history. So like he's honestly like the one, player here that I'm not sure what his future holds. Like I'm pretty sure that Logan Wilson's going to get an offer. I'm almost 100% sure that T. Higgins is going to get an offer. I just don't know about DJ Reader. He might be like the biggest piece here that fans want to keep around, and maybe the team doesn't really see it that way.
Yeah. We will definitely see, but the Bengals are doing a lot of work behind the scenes, it would seem, and they, we'll be keeping an eye out for announcements on some of these star players very, very soon. But Justin Herbert signs a big deal, $262.5 million in total value, obviously affecting Joe Burrow and his future contract with the team. Again, Lamar Jackson has a new deal. Justin Herbert has a new deal. Jalen Hurts has a new deal. There are a lot of young quarterbacks, and a couple of which were in Joe Burrow's draft class that have received these mega deals. So obviously it affects what's going to happen there. And it looks like the Bengals are going to be primed to give him a historic deal when the time comes, and then of course do some additional work on some of the other players that they want to extend. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza, and this is part of the Cincy Jungle Podcast Network, along with other great shows talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk with Matt Minnick, and of course 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. You can get all of those shows on your favorite audio streamer if you like the audio side. So go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We are there. And then, of course, if you like the video side of things, you can subscribe underneath the Phantom Man currently right now, John Sharon. There's a Cincy Jungle logo, but our show logo, the Orange and Black Insider, is down there. Click that to subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And of course, give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing on specific videos, or hey, every video, we appreciate it. And then of course, you got to go give a thumbs up to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page as well. We stream live there and on various Twitter accounts. So thank you for your support. We've been doing this for a little while now, and we've had a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let's talk some training camp, my friend. Bengals, I mean, they've been doing kind of some stuff recently, but this was the day. You know, they're reporting, they're in pads, they're doing, you know, a little bit more intensive drills and all kinds of different things. But this was kind of the true kickoff of training camp today, and they are out there. Thankfully, it seems that I didn't hear anything about injuries or anything like that, so that's we could be thankful about that. But, and of course, we could be thankful that this is a normal start to training camp for Joe Burrow. He's out there day one working with the guys.
Normal for everyone except Drew Chrisman. I don't know if you heard about that, but
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully he's all right. But he had, on the surface, looks just like a Joe Burrow 2022 situation where it's just a surprise trip to the hospital kind of out of nowhere for him. So hopefully he's doing all right. But everyone else who was at practice seemed to be okay. And with Joe Burrow, the biggest takeaway for me, Anthony, was that obviously being healthy for the start of camp is phenomenal, and it's unlike what he's had to deal with for the past 2 years. But it also means that it's the continuation of what he was doing in OTAs and minicamp. It's not like he was just trying to work his way back to full strength and get comfortable with everything. He already has an established comfort level, and he was continuing to do the things that he was trying to emphasize in May and June. And that, to me, looked like a lot of throwing off platform, you know, evading rushers and just throwing on the run, along with just a re-emphasis on play action too. Like we saw a lot of that in minicamp in some of those early clips. And I think that was the first touchdown of training camp this year, was a little play action out of shotgun. And he just threw a perfect deep pass to none other than his other, you know, contract buddy, T. Higgins. So all these guys are on the same page. They're all firing on all cylinders. We're not worrying about if Burrow is, you know, scared of pressure coming off a bad knee. We're not worrying about where his full strength is. He's not rolling around on a little, you know, golf cart as he's working back to full strength. No, he's doing all the things that he was building on in the summer or in the spring, and now he's doing the same things in the summer.
It's a relief to see. And of course, you know, you're seeing the guys run around and make some plays and having some fun. That is good. Actually, you know, before I'm sure. Well, you know, I'm sharing this. Why not? We'll go on some of these clips. But there was some big news that came out late yesterday, and it revolves around, I believe, this guy, Chidobe Awuzie, is back and was cleared from the PUP list. I was a little surprised at how quickly he returned from the PUP list, quite honestly. But he is back working with the team and looks to be on track to get set for week one. What that looks like in terms of snaps and everything, that's, you know, we'll have to see. But I mean, that's good news for the Bengals, kind of getting more close to all hands on deck.
I was so confused by that because I think we all expected him to start on the PUP just because he's coming off a big injury, just like La'el Collins is. To take him off after 48 hours, it's almost like they weren't sure if he would pass a physical. Like they didn't even check up on him, and then he just reported was clearly fine, said, oh, yeah, you're good to go. But, you know, they're still easing him back in, along with, I think, Jonah Williams as well, who's also cleared to practice and was practicing today. So, yeah, I mean, he looks exactly like he did in June when we saw those clips of him rehabbing and everything. So, yeah, it's good to see him back.
Yeah, here's, I think this is from the Bengals Twitter account here. Here's the guys coming in. Obviously, so that's from Bengals.com. A little video there, and then here Mike Petraglia, who noted what you noted here. Chrisman going to a trip to the hospital. Now, did you hear that it was an appendix issue, or was it just something still unknown? Or I hadn't heard appendix. I just knew that he was.
No, it was undisclosed. No, there's no specifics yet.
Yeah. And here's Richard Skinner from Local 12 saying that he had a medical issue come up and was still in the hospital. So that's a little jarring when you read that, but hopefully he's no other update or timeline for return there. And then you see here's Joe Burrow from Jeremy Roush, Fox 19, making some throws here across the middle. You like that? And then here, this is the big news, John. Jonah Williams gets the first rep in teams as the starting right tackle. Any surprise there for you, given either the injury and or really the position switch, or is this what you thought was going to happen here?
Well, if he's healthy enough to practice, then they're going to give him the first chance over Jackson Carman, who's his only real competition right now. But it was what Zach Taylor said before practice that was interesting, because while Jonah is back, they're not going to just fully, just have him take every single rep. They're going to take these, I think, first 4 practices that he said to kind of ease him back in, and there's going to be a rotation of that position. So long as that Jonah looks somewhat competent at right tackle in this 4-day period before they put on the pads, I think he'll probably get first team reps when the pads actually come on, and then he'll start to take more reps.
Well, that is relayed from Kelsey Conway there, but yeah, I'm in agreement with you. And I think also, while there is maybe a little bit of an element of, ease Jonah back in, I do think they want to try and give at least a decent look at Jackson Carman as well. I think right now, Jonah's got the inside track, but they still want something to work out with Jackson Carman. That is for sure. So I think they also want to see what he can do, and giving him maybe a little bit more snaps, or, a high level of snaps for someone that is behind in the depth chart there. And then here we go. Trey Hendrickson and Orlando Brown Jr. in the middle of a scuffle. The new guy already making his mark at camp, getting involved, getting in the mix on the very first practice.
So when I saw this, I initially thought, these two guys probably have played hundreds of snaps against each other already between the Chiefs and Bills or Bengals rivalry. They've always been going up against each other on that side of the line. So I figured there was some bad blood here, but this was, according to Orlando Brown Jr., he just saw how, Hendrickson was going at 100%, and something just kind of triggered him. He, quote unquote, blacked out and just kind of went a little too far. And then he apologized to Hendrickson and the team afterwards. So I don't think this was like any malicious intent or anything. Obviously, tempers flare in training camp. It'd be more abnormal if we didn't see stuff like this. But there's not a lot to read into here. This was just, I just kind of went too hard. My bad.
Yeah. I don't know that there's much to see from this clip here. If you can tell what's going on there or not. Yeah. But interesting to note what you said about how they went up against each other and everything. But these tempers that flare in training camp usually come, after you've had a lot of practices and you've been in the heat for days and days and days, right? It's like, man, you're already doing it on day one, early in the process. It's anyway. And then this not so great report here from Yoshivas via Kelsey Conway, saying a couple of drops from him today. And then this was good to see as well with the Chidobe Awuzie, even though he's returning. DJ Turner, the guy who was playing second team reps, he says he makes one of the plays of the day for defense, showing great speed, tracking a deep ball, jumping ahead of the receiver and breaking up the pass. Nearly got a one-handed pick. He has been the star of second team drills. So you like to hear that as well. So one thing I noticed too, and I don't know if you saw this. I don't have the clip, unfortunately, but Joe Burrow was speaking with someone somewhat recently, and he was talking about different throwing mechanics from his rookie year to present, where he's talking about a little more torque and using that the hips and the back leg a little bit, and it shows how much more he can get on the ball, and that has seemingly improved the arm strength from what we saw as a rookie and the leaps since. I don't know if you've seen that clip. I'll have to try and hunt for it, but I think you're seeing more and more of that when you see Burrow throw, especially as, you can kind of, things are slowed down and in practice, and you're kind of specifically honing in on just him running around the field basically and throwing to a single wideout instead of, a massive people and a massive bodies where you could really kind of concentrate on the mechanics.
Yeah, it's a good testament to why development in terms of arm strength is never really finalized once a guy gets into the league. Aaron Rodgers may be the best ever example of this, the way that his whole throwing motion and his arm strength and raw power evolved from Cal to Green Bay was nothing short of remarkable. And it was definitely an area where Burrow needed to improve coming out of LSU. But he did mention in a really funny interview with Caleb Presley the other day that he gave a serious answer, the most important muscle for a quarterback is his core. And I think that's always something that can be improved. And the more torque that you can have, even when you don't have a stable platform. And that's how some of these quarterbacks are just getting off these fireballs when they're throwing on the run and there's only one leg off the ground. It's another asset that Burrow can have in his back pocket should he increase the strength in that area, and it's only gotten better since 2020.
Not the heart, John.
Not the heart. I was surprised too. I thought it was just an organ. I didn't know it was a muscle.
Yeah. That was an entertaining interview, man. For sure. What else did you see and or hear today from training camp that you found compelling and or, hey, this is something noteworthy?
I think we've covered most of it, man. But just T. Higgins just looks so impressive to me. I say this every training camp, but he's just a bigger AJ Green, and that's scary considering he's the 1B receiver of this team. But it is really nice. Obviously, it would actually hurt Higgins a lot if he were to not report to camp. As Andre Prado mentioned to me on Twitter, if he were to hold out right now for a contract, he would lose an accrued season and he wouldn't enter unrestricted free agency next year he may want to if things kind of go sour here. But to see him and Burrow locked in with all this kind of over their heads, it's a testament to the culture and the bond that these guys have here. And there's not a ton that you can go off of from one training camp practice, but this team looks pretty locked in for it being late July.
They do look pretty locked in. That is for sure. Let's talk a little bit about. Are you concerned at all about the report on Yoshivas in the drops there? I know he's a rookie; it's his very first practice. We had this conversation from a particular rookie wide receiver a couple of years ago with the Cincinnati Bengals, and that turned out pretty good. But any concern there? I know not the biggest football program from whence he came, and so maybe I don't know. I don't personally take a lot of stock into it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, did Princeton use the balls with the stripes on the end? Is he missing that too? Is Florio drafting up a tweet? Because obviously your 5th overall pick dropping footballs is not is probably a little bit more important than your 6th round pick doing so. But Yoshivas will be fine.
Yeah. Any bold predictions from camp from you, John? Be it a player? We talked a little bit of position groups and everything last week as we headed into. What are some bold predictions you're thinking of seeing here as the weeks unfold?
Can I say a slightly negative one? Will you allow me to do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'll say Orlando Brown.
Whatever you want, man.
I'm going to say Orlando Brown has some struggles here and there because of the competition that he's going up against. I think Hendrickson has always kind of gotten the better of him in years past just because he can get under your pads and he can get quick up around the edge. Joseph Asai is not really that much different. And if Miles Murphy gets some reps against him, I think he could flash against him too. It's a testament. I'm saying testament a lot this episode, but it's an example of how talented the Bengals are at defensive end. And we have said this so many times, man. Offensive tackles never look tremendous in training camp, especially when there's no pads, right? And it's one-on-ones, there's no help. But there's going to be some times I think Orlando Brown kind of gets lost against speed, which is expected. That's his one, shortcoming. And it's not an area to panic. It's not an area to freak out. The Bengals didn't waste $64 million, but it's training camp. It's time for the defensive lineman to shine up until it's preseason and we're getting, actual reps with these guys. And Oh, also, we should note that we could be seeing these starters, in preseason action, unlike last year. Joe Burrow said that he would like to take maybe a series or two in preseason just to get acclimated, which he didn't get last year. No starters on either side of the ball played in the preseason last year for the Bengals, and that was also something that Zach Taylor said he was open to changing this year. So we might actually see these guys again playing real action in the coming month.
That's what I was just going to follow up and ask you about. How much time do you think these guys might? Because last year too, you have to remember that the offensive line. I mean, you had 3 new starters on the offensive line, and I mean they really, without preseason game snaps, there wasn't a lot of time to gel necessarily. I mean, you do that in practice and everything, but you started to see them hit their collective stride as the year wore on, and obviously they tinkered with the offensive system and what they were doing out there. But I guess if this is going to take place, I mean, are you saying what a half, a couple of series, a quarter, a half? I mean, what are you thinking is the tweak in the game plan, if there is one, in terms of playing time for starters in the preseason?
I could see like 2 series, and because I don't know. Like it's a whole new world now with one last preseason game. I guess it's like the 3rd year of that, but it's still there's not like a true set like standard like it used to be. Like it was always that 3rd preseason game you'd see a half out of these guys, and that would be it. Right. And then the 4th preseason would just be a tryout for all these guys who are trying to make the roster. Now I think you have some teams who do it in week 1 and just don't play the final 2 weeks, and maybe it's week 2 that's the new week 3. Like I don't know when that comes. But I would expect Burrow and the starters to be out there for at least one series in like the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, I know there's their injury risk and all that stuff. I think it would be smart if they did that. Quite honestly, I mean, I think they need to get that just based on last season. And then we talked about this too last week, I think, John, where the Bengals can't, with the way that the schedule is set up and who they play in the first 2 weeks, they cannot afford a slow start. They cannot afford an 0-2 start, maybe not even a 1-1 start. They have to come out hot. They have to come out ready, not sluggish. And the hope is, again, that with Burrow in the full off season and maybe increased playing time in the preseason, that will not be the case with those first 2 games.
I think we just kind of started something. The Bengals need to be Little Caesars, hot and ready.
Let's get Little Caesars on the horn. We need a sponsor. Let's get them on the horn. Well, that's kind of we're only one practice in. But training camp's here. A lot of stuff about Joe Burrow's contract, and of course the guys are out at work and doing some on-field stuff. So you like to see that, and well, there's still kind of the little, goofiness as they check in or whatever. I feel, and maybe this is just me trying to grasp at straws a little bit. I still feel a little bit like there is a slightly different attitude or air around this team, maybe a little bit more serious, maybe, I don't know, just based on how last year ended and how, as they were winning games and going on that streak. And then obviously we talked about the Burrowhead stuff and everything, the mayor getting in the mix with stuff. I feel like there's maybe a little bit more, and this isn't an indictment on them last year, but just maybe a little bit more business-like, it feels like this year going into it, based on just, I don't know, little hints here and there.
Yeah. They're careful to not say there's like more urgency, because that would imply that the last 2 years weren't urgent either, which I don't think is the case in their eyes. But this is, I think, the first real year that there's true, genuine expectations of greatness with them. You have Chris Collinsworth going on Kay Adams and saying my Super Bowl pick is stupidly the Bengals, because I don't think he wants to do that to his former team. But like it's no longer, oh, this team is going to regress, or this team is still bad and there's no way they're going to make the Super Bowl. No, there's they have a chance to do something that has never been done before in the AFC North, which is win the division back to back to back. And they're the clear number 2 right now to Kansas City, and they're still considered their biggest threat to take them out. And obviously Kansas City winning back-to-back Super Bowls, that's not, it's like a 50-50 problem. I don't think everyone's going to be on that board, just because it's so rare to happen, even though it's still the Chiefs. So I think a lot of people view this as the Bengals' turn to actually do this. And the Bengals can say all they want about not hearing the outside noise, and for the most part I think it's true, but I think they kind of feel it in their own way too. And that's probably where all this comes from.
Yeah. And again, they've been so close the last couple of years, and this year, these guys are starting to. Many of the young stars are now starting to hit their primes of their career and everything. And I like that they don't use necessarily the phrase urgency, but you could tell there's a little bit more seriousness, it feels like, with their approach of what they're doing, and just kind of how they're addressing the media and everything. But maybe that's just me trying to read between the lines, and maybe I'm feeling that for them. I don't know, based on last year. But any final thoughts on training camp before we're gonna start heading out of here in just a minute? Any final thoughts on training camp or anything of that ilk before we head out?
Well, the funniest thing that Burrow said after practice, he was asked about being on Netflix's quarterback documentary this year. He was approached about Netflix, and he declined. And he said he actually hasn't even seen the season of it, which, by the way, I would recommend. It's phenomenal. And someone asked him why he hasn't seen it, and he said, "Would you guys want to watch, a documentary about Jeff Hobson?" And it got like roars of laughs. And I'm just here to say, I would fund that. I would absolutely like to see the life of Jeff Hobson, because the man is an enigma. He barely tweets. We barely hear anything about him that isn't written on Bengals.com. But I think there's a lot more to meets the eye for Jeff Hobson. I would love to see a documentary on him.
I would love to do that as well. And you know what else I would love to do with Jeff Hobson, aside from getting him back on the show again? Hopefully we can do that soon. I would love to go to because he's a big baseball guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing you do know about him. I think it's the Red Sox, right? That's his jam. So I would love to just go to a game with him and have a beer and just talk baseball, talk football. That would be something where I would be like, hey, film him at a baseball game hanging out. That's what I would do. But yeah, I actually, John, I have not seen that documentary, and I it's not because, I haven't had the stomach for it. I don't know. Just, seeing the whole, how it all plays out with Mahomes ending up winning and all of that. I'm sure it is well worth the watch. I just haven't had the stomach for it, I don't think, as of yet. But you're recommending it.
I will say there's an episode where it does cover the Week 13 game where the Bengals beat the Chiefs. And the end of that episode, for any Bengals fans out there, is worth a watch.
Okay. Well, you reeled me in. Was that your mic drop about Hobson?
No, it was not.
Okay. Let's drop it and let's get out of here. What do you got for us?
My true mic drop is kudos to the Bengals for kind of updating a lot of things in their stadium. A lot of the graphics have been updated. I think they had like new video board ribbons. But more importantly, TQL Stadium, where FC Cincinnati plays, is the first stadium I saw where they basically had these like high class gas station markets where you just go in, you pick a beer, you check out, and you're bing, bang, boom, you're done. You're not waiting this giant queue line in the concourse for like 20 minutes. I'm like, every stadium should have this. And now the Bengals do. They have like dozens of them throughout the stadium now. It'll make going to the game and getting your stuff a lot quicker, a lot more better. And yeah, long overdue. A lot of those upgrades.
So yes, they look amazing. And so where you and I finally met in person at the stadium a couple of years ago, is that one of the areas in which they will have some of these new?
Potentially.
Yeah. Because that was an area that was a little bit of a disaster at halftime to go get your beer and go, bathroom break, whatever it is you needed to do. It was a little bit of a disaster zone in there. And so to see, when I saw that was like one of my first thoughts. I'm like, I wonder if that's the area that I met John at halftime for that game, because that was just like traffic jam city and people were, standing in line and the whole deal. So hopefully, but they look really neat. It's, I think if I remember correctly, they've started to put some of these similar type of things when I've gone to Angels games out here recently. There's kind of the mini marts or the little things where you just kind of shoot in and out of there instead of going up to the full blown concession stand, that sort of thing. So they seem to be effective in terms of, time and all that kind of stuff. So kudos to them. Yeah. I want to give a shout out to a guy who has been really supportive actually of Cincy Jungle and stuff that you and I do, John, and that's Marty Bannister. He's a local radio host. He had, I forget his previous, where he was previously, And now he's got a new show on Fox Sports in Dayton, and he had me on this afternoon. So go check that out if you want to hear me yammer on. But great guy. He's really supportive of what you and I do in Cincy Jungle, and go give him a follow as well. Marty Bannister. He is now hosting a show on, like I said, I think it's 980 Fox Sports 980 in Dayton. So good time. Always talk to him, and big Bengals guy. So he covers a lot of different sports there, but it was fun talking to him.
Look at Anthony getting his voice out over Ohio. Love to see it.
I don't know about that, but it was a good time. Well, John, thank you, buddy. You are the man, and we'll be back with all kinds of different stuff throughout training camp and throughout the preseason, post-game reports, guests, listener question shows, all kinds of different, some other little tidbit videos and creative videos and stuff. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. So that's why you got to subscribe both to your favorite audio side on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, so you can get all our great shows. And then also, if you like the video stuff, you got to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate it. John, have a good week, my friend. We'll reconnect on here soon and talk more about what's going on at training camp with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Pitching the tent. It's camp time.
Later.